No. Good afternoon, participants. I welcome you to this second session
Good
of
afternoon, sir.
final day of the FDP.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
For this particular session, we have with us esteemed Professor Bikramjit Basu sir. Actually, a person who needs no introduction. So it will be an audacity at my part to introduce him to all of you. Still, as a customary, I need to say a few lines about sir. Sir is currently working as a professor at IISc Bangalore, specializing in engineering ceramics and biomaterials science. He has co-authored in more than 200 peer-reviewed research papers with 23 papers in Journal of American Ceramic Society. He has authored in the first Indian textbook on musculoskeletal biomaterials, published by Springer. Sir has received many awards. So to mention a few, Young Scientist Award from the Indian Ceramic Society, the Indian National Academy of Engineering, and the Indian National Science Academy. He was given the Metallurgist of the Year Award in 2010, instituted by Ministry of Steels, Government of India. He is the first Indian to receive the Cobble Award for Young Scholar from American Ceramic Society in 2008. He is an elected fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Science, India, and many more. He was awarded the Santi Swarup Bhatnagar Prize for Science and Technology, the highest science award in India. And along with that, please join me to congratulate sir for receiving the Richard Brook Award from the European Ceramic Society. He'll be receiving this award in 2021. It is an international prize given to one non-European ceramist every 2 years for contribution to ceramic science or technology. So with this, I, on behalf of Department of Production Engineering, VSUCT Burla, Odisha, along with the participants, I welcome you, sir, to this Atal FDP on 3D printing and design. And I thank you for kindly agreeing to our invitation and sparing your valuable time for contributing to this particular FDP. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to kindly start the session. Please, sir.
So, good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mohapatra to invite me to give a presentation at this faculty development program. So what I'm going to do today is to show you how to share the screen. Is it like present now or that one, or how to?
Yes, sir. You need to click present now. Then you can share your entire screen.
Present now I have seen. Then I said share. I don't know which one I have to go. Present now and then window, maybe. Yeah. So then I said share. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, sir. It is coming now. It is visible, sir. It is coming now.
Is it going to next slide and all those things?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is perfect.
All right. So thank you very much, Dr. Mohapatra, for inviting me to this faculty development program. It's indeed a pleasure to share the status, challenges, and recommendations in the field of biomaterials and implants. So as has been mentioned in the introduction, that I started my career at IIT Kanpur earlier in 2001 to 2011. And then for last 10 years, I have been in IISc Bangalore. So this status essentially reflects my my association with the field of biomaterial science and implants over last 15 years or so, since I started my research in the field of biomaterials around 2006 and so on. So whatever I'm going to show you in today's slides are also published in the form of a book which is just released by Indian National Science Academy with Springer Nature. So I'm going to show you also that book details as well. So as you know that we are from Indian Sub-Science, and then this is our Materials Research Center. So this is some details of the Materials Research Center, which you also can see in our website. So this is the plan of the talk. These are the different chapters in this book, and then I'm going to show you one by one the various aspects what have been mentioned in this plan of the talk. So what is the meaning of crossing the boundaries? Whenever we talk about the biomaterials and implants, you have to understand that it does not belong to one single field of scientific discipline. What it means that, suppose somebody is a mechanical engineer and he or she has to work in the field of biomaterial science. I mean, while mechanical engineering, some design aspects, some manufacturing aspect would be needed, but at the same time, he or she would have to necessarily collaborate with, clinicians on one hand and also biologists on the other hand. And many times, being an engineer, I can say that we did not read biology after our class 12. So you have to revisit your understanding of the biological sciences as well if you wish to pursue this field of biology, biomaterials and implants. So what it means that you have to come out of the comfort zone and start penetrating into the other disciplines if you want to seriously contribute to the field of biomaterial science and implants. So this has been exactly captured in this concept triangle. If you see that lower vertices, lower part of this concept triangle, you have one side in engineering and physical sciences, and another side you have medical and biological sciences. So based on the concepts and ideas from engineering and physical sciences, one can develop and manufacture implantable biomaterials. While on the other hand, if you have sufficient idea and knowledge of the medical and biological sciences, then you would be in a position to understand the nature, characteristics, sizes, properties of the components of the living system. Components of the living system essentially meaning that components of the living system essentially means that protein, cells, bacteria, blood, and so on. And the core concept of the biomaterial science is to develop an understanding between develop an understanding on the interactions of the implantable special class of materials with a proven compatibility with this living system components like protein, blood, physical adhesion points where where the cell surface receptors interact with the line structure. These are like actin filaments of the cytoskeleton or several other components of the cytoskeleton and so on. So the property
Participants, please stay tuned. There is some network issue. Sir is joining soon. He'll be joining soon. Please wait.
Up to what point you have seen the slides?
Yes, sir. Up to this slide, sir.
This one?
It has means just started. Then some network issue came. Sir.
I have explained the first part, or
Yes,
no,
sir.
I could
Yes.
not. Okay, so the property that which essentially distinguishes the biomaterials from other classes of materials is the biocompatibility property, and this biocompatibility is kind of a holistic property which essentially defines the compatibility of a material with the living system. So it essentially describes the beneficial cellular or tissue response for targeted clinical applications. So what you see in this cartoon, that when an implant is placed in a living system, so all these things that you can see around this implant, these are like proteins in the coiled form. So proteins get absorbed, and then some of the cells that which comes near to the surfaces is the foreign body giant cells, and then in response to the cytokines, some of the fibroblast cells. Then essentially these implants will be enclosed in a fibrous capsule like bag, and this will essentially isolate the implants from the rest of this biological system. As I said in the beginning of this lecture, the biomaterial science essentially truly represents an interdisciplinary field of science and engineering. And in this biomaterial science, in the field of biomaterial science, it essentially integrates the concepts and ideas from biomaterial science and biological sciences. Whereas some other disciplines, they also play an important role is medical sciences. For example, particularly clinicians, when you are doing a lot of translational research involving preclinical studies in animal models or the clinical studies in human patients. Ultimately, the field of biomaterials have significant influence or significant impact on human health care. And the other peripheral disciplines which also play an important role in these biomaterials is that manufacturing science, toxicological science, biomechanics, and veterinary science. So if you look at the current spectrum of the clinical applications of biomaterials, you can see often these biomaterials, often in many textbooks, they always mention that materials, these biomaterials are a unique class of materials which can replace the various important anatomical parts from head to toe of a human body. So for some of the representative examples are provided, but this certainly is not a complete list of these applications. For example, in the cranium, in the human cranium, you can put some cranioplasty for cranioplasty surgery to treat decompressive craniectomy. You have dental implants, which can be either titanium 6L4B or zirconia implants. You have a cochlear implants. You have contact lenses, cardiovascular implants like pacemaker. Lumbar disc replacement for neurosurgical applications. Then you have this total hip joint replacement, THR. And in total hip joint replacements, you have different type of material or device components. One is the femoral heads, one is the acetabular liner, one is this femoral stem. And then you have knee joints, again, total knee joints replacements, TKR. And bone fixation, typically if the patient has undergone a trauma or accidents, then stainless steel plates or titanium plates normally are placed, and then which can be removed, after longer time period. So essentially, biomaterials are intended to replace a body part or augment a function of body part or regenerate the body part or organ, and it can be either naturally derived or synthetically manufactured. This particular field is of greater national interest simply because that 75 to 80% of the implants and biomaterials which are used in hospitals and clinics in India are all imported. So whenever you use any imported implants and biomaterials, there are two things you need to consider. One is that cost of the total healthcare, which will be charged to a patient, that will increase. And in India, where many people, they still survive below poverty level, if we indigenously develop and manufacture biomaterials and implants, that will substantially reduce the cost of healthcare, and that will make the healthcare affordable in in a country like India. And that is also true many of the developing nations in Africa and many other nations and many other third world countries around the world. So the second thing, one is the cost, healthcare cost, and make it affordable. Second thing is that whatever implants are manufactured in abroad, like Europe as well as the United States, and which are being imported to India, those implants are essentially customized for the Caucasian or European patients or American patients. So they may not fit to the anatomical defects or anatomical parts, or they may not be most suitable or most desirable as far as the Indian population is concerned. Because typically Indian and other Asian population have a different anatomical features compared to the European and Caucasian. So therefore, many of the implants, since it is not available in Indian market, local indigenous development, so we do not have any other option except to use that. But if you place it in human patients, many times, if it does not fit into the very properly with the desirable biomechanical properties and biocompatibility and so on, then what will happen, that patient may need to undergo the revision surgery again after a few years. So that will again add up to this healthcare cost. So what are the medical materials and devices? So this is very important that we have to distinguish at this point in the lecture that medical materials and medical devices are two different things. Medical materials, as I said, that it is special grade of materials with clinically acceptable biocompatibility and that are used in human patients. So for example, natural biomaterials like collagen gelatin, bioceramics, hydroxyapatite glass ceramics, special alloys like stainless steel, cobalt chrome moly, Ti6L4B, and polymers. Outside the body, for the body support, then people use these composites, aluminum and steel based. Medical devices, these are like external devices which are essentially used for the safe and effective prevention, diagnosis, treatment and rehabilitation of illness and disease. Now, in body, you have deep brain stimulation, neurostimulators, gastric stimulator, or insulin pumps, or cardiac defibrillators, or pacemakers, or cochlear implants. And outside the body, you can see these are also medical devices, what you see in the clinics and hospitals. Now, biomaterial science as a scientific discipline, it can be described by this particular tetrahedron, which we just defined, is that one end of this tetrahedron, you have the biomaterials development at the lab scale. Then another one is a biocompatibility evaluation. You have clinical studies, you have public health. So ultimately, clinical translation takes place when you do this biocompatibility in the cell study, in the cell level, as well as the preclinical studies, and then going for human studies. And ultimately, the outcome of the clinical studies will impact the public health. And then public health essentially also demands that part of the clinical needs that will trigger the biomaterials development. So at a more fundamental level, that what are the things which are important in the biomaterial science? So at the basic level, when a material is placed in a human or in a biological system, this is the protein which will come and adhere on the bit or get absorbed on the biomaterial substrate spontaneously within a few seconds. So what you see in the lowest level, this is a, let's say, simulated hydroxyapatite surface, let's say 001 surface, and this is some of the residue of the protein macromolecules. Now this residue will come and try to get adsorbed on the biomaterial substrate. We have to understand that these proteins will retain its natural state or will get denatured, and particularly in a free conditions without any external stimulation. Now if you give some external stimulation, whether it is photochemical stimulation or electrical stimulation or magnetic stimulation, how it will impact this protein conformation and so on. So that can be investigated using molecular dynamics simulation, and that will give a lot of insights in the molecular interactions between the protein and biomaterial substance. At the next level of interaction, what you see here in the middle level, you have a eukaryotic cell, and you can see the cell surface receptors, which is like a tongue, and you can see in this hatched plates here, this is the two-dimensional plate. This is essentially represent biomaterial substrate, on which you can see the smaller tiny features of different geometric objects like square, triangle, circle, and so on. So these are essentially protein molecules which get adsorbed on the biomaterial substrate. So this cell will interact with the biomaterial substrate through these interactions with these adsorbed proteins. And then still next level, tissue material interaction. And what is tissue? Tissue is nothing but that self-organized array of the cells of the specific types which can exhibit a very specific biological function in a biological system. So at the tissue level, you can see that this is essentially interface of this biomaterial substrate and then tissue and the natural tissue. And at that interface, you can see that a number of events can take place in terms of the cell activity, in terms of the new tissue formation, vascularization, like, angiogenesis and so on. So that all these things will collectively describe the tissue response to the biomaterial system. This is an example that how biomaterials play an important role in some of the life-threatening diseases like cardiovascular treatment. Now, what happens in your blood if your cholesterol level is very high? Then cholesterol will go and get deposited on the wall of the arteries, and as a result, effective area for the blood circulation or blood flow through the arteries will be significantly reduced. And if it reduced, that means what? That this this heart has to pump at a much higher force, and blood pressure will increase, and eventually it leads to the heart attack, or what in that medical terminology they call myocardial infarction. So myocardial infarction is nothing but a heart attack. So what are the two biomaterials based interventions in this in the cardiovascular disease treatment? One is angioplasty. Angioplasty essentially means you put some stents, and stent is necessarily a fine wire, and this is the coronary stents, and these wires are typically made of the titanium or nickel titanium shape memory alloys. And when you put this material through these arteries, so they will essentially clear these blockages or the blood clots. The second thing is that suppose in case of that very significant heart attack or significant part of the cardiac tissue is dead and so on, then one of the ways that you can put these things by placing the cardiac patch on this part of this on the damaged part of the cardiac tissue. And this cardiac patch should have sufficient electrical conductivity and should have the ability to support the growth of the cardiomyocytes. Remember, cardiomyocytes is one of the cell types which will constitute the cardiac tissue, and cardiomyocytes is one of the most difficult cell types to culture, to artificially grow on the biomaterial substrate. Now, when it comes to that bone and bone tissue engineering, bone can be described as a vascularized tissue with a hybrid structure of the hard surface with a spongy core. So hard surface is typically called as a cortical bone, while the spongy core is typically known as the trabecular region. So bone also can be described as a polymer ceramic composite. So polymeric part is the collagen, and ceramic part is what we call mineralization or mineralized part, that's the calcium phosphate. And commonly used biomaterials for bone tissue engineering is beta-tricalcium phosphate, hydroxyapatite-based materials, as well as the bioactive glasses like 4,5-S5 bioactive glasses. And metallic implants for orthopedic applications, they are functionally integrated in the human body, typically 4 weeks after implantation. Titanium-based materials, an excellent example, although it is fairly costly compared to stainless steel, and it has a higher resistance to corrosion and exhibit good specific strength because titanium has much lower density than of the steel-based materials. The other things that are important, that many times the researchers are confused, even I have seen many PhD students, they use the term scaffold and implant. The scaffold and implant does not mean the same. Scaffold and implants, they are two different classes of materials having a completely different set of properties. So therefore, they cannot be used in an interchangeable manner. Just to substantiate my statement, scaffold should possess the following properties, like it has inherently 3D structures with interconnected porosity, and it has biodegradable in biological systems, support cell functionality. And in the implants case, implants are typically non-porous, dense material, and they are expected to have better mechanical properties than scaffold. And scaffold is also expected to facilitate better cell proliferation and functionality than implant because of the porous architecture. Now, porosity of any scaffold materials can decrease the mechanical properties. So therefore, you have to design the scaffold so that it has a correct balance of the mechanical properties and biocompatibility while allowing nutrients and blood supply to the cells. What it means that porosity in the scaffolds essentially facilitate vascularization and angiogenesis. So biocompatibility can be probed using the in vitro and in vivo experiments. So in vitro essentially means that is the experiments which are conducted in the glassware, and biocompatibility of implant can be influenced by chemical composition, by mechanical properties or surface properties, and biomaterials also should promote the interaction, as I have shown in the beginning, and also an important aspect of the biocompatible biomaterials is that it should not allow the growth of the bacteria, which can eventually cause infection. Now, additive manufacturing is one of the important manufacturing technique which has revolutionized the field of biomaterials and implants. And additive manufacturing essentially refers by layer fabrication. This is the main basic things. And also, additive manufacturing can be pursued by using different heat sources like laser beam or electron beam. At the same time, additive manufacturing can also take place at room temperature, and binder jetting or 3D binder jet printing is one of the popular techniques for additive manufacturing. And 3D printing can be used to manufacture metals, polymers, and ceramics. And 3D bioprinting also can be used to manufacture tissue engineered scaffolds with cells and proteins. Now, let us now discuss that what is the economic impact, healthcare initiative, and research funding in the field of biomaterials. So one of the major things in the field of biomaterials that can be highlighted by United Nations, one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and one of the goals is the good health and well-being. And so essentially, biomaterials and implants come under this third goal of the United Nations, and which is just published in few years ago. If you look at the healthcare in India, India certainly, because of the huge population, more than 1.4 billion citizens of India, it is certainly a fastest growing healthcare markets in the world. And that is one of the reasons that why some of the large industries like Tata Steel New Materials business have started penetrating into the field of biomaterials and medical devices. And what this Tata Steel is doing is that they are essentially taking some of the key initiatives which are related to the healthcare, Ayushman Bharat, that is a healthcare for major cost, because health was traditionally being given a low priority. And if you look at this, India's public healthcare expenditure is just 1.3% of GDP in 2019-2020. And then in 2018, the country lagged behind many of the BRICS peers as well as developed nations. So BRICS essentially Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And India's center plus states public expenditure on health, you can see in the 2019-2020, it was like just more than 1.2%. Now, if you look at the public expenditure of health in 2018, for some of the developed nations like Japan, it was 9.2%. United States, it is 14.3% of the GDP. UK is 7.5%. Germany is also equally high, it's 9.5%. So whereas in India is much, much less, much below than that of the China. It's like, half of that of the China, for example. What is the Indian market? Global and medical devices market. If you look at the Indian market, it is projected to be $20 billion market in India by 2024, and global market is 30 times higher. It's almost like $600 billion. So it's indeed market represents a huge promise if you develop implants and biomaterials in India. Now, if you look at that, smaller segments in that medical devices are healthcare, like orthopedic, for example, orthopedic biomaterial, orthopedic soft tissue, arthroscopy, orthopedic large joint, bone joint, orthopedic trauma, that will constitute the major part, like, more than 60%, whereas spinal implants constitute like 27% of the total. Now, same is true for the dental implants. All the market share is fairly small compared to the orthopedic, because if you look at the dental implant, we are at 2021. So here it is around $4 billion, and it is projected to go to up to $6 billion by the end of 2028. And global market size in the dental implants and prostheses in 2017 was $7.2 billion, and expected growth, it is CAGR, stands for compound annual growth rate in dental implants and prostheses, is expected to be 6.1%, and to reach a value of around $12 billion by 2025. Now, in terms of that type of implants, with the zirconia versus titanium as dental implants, titanium implants will remain or will constitute the major market for this, dental implant market sectors, and it is large, but zirconia implants are certainly penetrating into the Indian market, Indian and global market slowly. But zirconia certainly is much costlier than titanium. Now, in terms of the demand and forecast, in terms of this patient aids and implants, if you look at the blue one, it is $0.8 billion in 2019, and it is expected to increase to $2.84 billion by 2024, with CAGR, compound annual growth rate, is more than 23%. I mentioned few minutes back about the medical tourism. What it means that Indian hospitals and clinics, they receive patients from African nations and some of the neighboring countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and many other, Sri Lanka, and other Asian countries. And then the rationale behind this is that a patient typically, when he or she goes to Malaysia or Taiwan or Singapore and so on, they typically pay much more healthcare cost compared to they come to India. So this plot essentially tells you that a patient from other countries can shape up to 77.5% of the cost when compared to United States. And this data is based in 2018. And I think this data remains true or even maybe is increased that, they can save so much. But if you look at Singapore, they save only 32.5% compared to that in United States. So let me go through some of these India's medical devices park, and these medical devices, the target segments of medical devices is like cancer care or radiotherapy medical devices, radiology and imaging, anesthetics, cardiorespiratory, renal care medical, and implants and implantable electronic devices like cochlear implants and pacemakers. What is the funding? Like if you look at the Government of India funding, the DST, DBT, and ACRB Science Engineering Research Board and Imprint program, since 2015 or 2016, they are funding many of the projects related to the biomaterials and implants. Just to give you an idea that, individual implant program has funded like 140 million Indian rupees in the year 2017. That was the latest data I have. And those projects are still continuing because these imprint projects are 3 years. And 2017 and 18, if you look at this biodesign program of Department of Biotechnology, it is like 140 million INR. But how does it kind of compare with that of most developed nations, like in most developed nations in Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific? Just to give you an idea, that right-hand slide essentially shows you UK's EPSRC funds around 576 crore Indian rupees, almost equivalent money or equivalent funds for 95 grants. And European Union's Horizon 2020 for future and emerging technologies, that gives like 1,524 crores in 2018-2020. So what I'm trying to say here, that although this funding is in increasing trend in India, but it's still a fraction of what many of the developed nations they fund in this particular area of this research area of biomaterials implants. Now, scientists who are particularly working in India, this kind of is historical perspective. In 1974, Sri Chitta Institute of Medical Science and Technology, which is the national lab of importance and which is funded by Department of Science and Technology, was established. And M.S. Valiathan, who has done pioneering work, and he and his team essentially designed and fabricated India's first heart valve, and which is known as heart valve, and which is licensed to TTK. And TTK essentially mentions that that this particular heart valve essentially has been used in many Indian hospitals. So there are other products which are also mentioned here in this particular slide, and these are essentially biomaterials, dental implants, acetabular liners, and so on. Now, in terms of this. In terms of the selected technologies from Sri Chitta Institute of Medical Science and Technology, you can see these are essentially 3D bioinformation, bioceramic coatings for dental implants, and so on. Now, I wanted to summarize the major groups in India who are working in the field of biomaterials implants in a northeast, southwest phases. And also I have mentioned some of the key national labs like THSTI, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, CGCRI, and CLRI, CSR CLRI, and some of the policymaking institute like Kalam Institute of Health Technology or Andhra Pradesh MedTech shown here in this slide. And I have mentioned as much as possible as according to my knowledge, who are the major players in the field of biomaterials and implants. I must confess here that this particular slide may not be complete in terms of all the groups who are working in India, but certainly it gives you an idea that who are the major researchers in the field of biomaterials, and some of them you may be knowing personally, or you may have heard them in different conferences. So one of the person who is not from India but from Nepal, Mr. Srivastav, he has started an undergraduate program in biomedical engineering, and he has a School of Biomedical Engineering in Kathmandu, and that is under Tribhuvan University in Nepal. So many of the other people you may be knowing personally as well. So this is the frontier biomaterials research areas which is pursued. So this list again is not complete, but certainly in terms of priority, in terms of the most extensive research is being carried out, I have summarized some of the major key research themes that is being pursued by many of these people who are being placed in this particular slide. Right. Now coming to the specific research programs, and then what is the rationale, what is the clinical need for these research programs. First one is the hip joint replacement and what is the clinical perspective. You can see on the left hand side, this is a diseased hip joint, and there is a stiffness mismatch and failure of implants, both the things which will drive the research in this particular field. Now recognizes this important CSRCG, CRA Calcutta, they have fabricated the Sira hip like 28 millimeter to 36 millimeter diameter, and you can see that there is a plasma spread hydroxyapatite coating on metal hip implants they have essentially fabricated. Again, another thing is that total hip joint replacement, that wear debris particles and causing infection. So you can see that when wear debris particles is released at that femoral head and acetabular liner interface, that they can activate many downstream biological events like macrophages activation or giant cells activation, as well as inflammation, leading to further osteoclast activation like bone resorption cells. So in a healthy bone, there is a fine balance between osteoblast cells and osteoclast cells. Now, if this balance is disturbed, like there is more number of osteoclast cells, then what will happen? This bone gets resolved. Bone gets resolved. So recognizing the importance, IISc researchers like my group, both at IIT Kanpur and IISc Bangalore, we have been working in this acetabular liner material, and this is one of the most recent generation of the acetabular liner that we have developed. So we have already developed 3 different generations of acetabular liner. And the most recent generation is ultra-molecular polyethylene and HDPE. And then we have introduced the graphene oxide, but graphene oxide cannot be dispersed unless it is chemically modified. Then we use the polyethylamine, and then we have modified graphene oxide, then dispersed it. And this nanofiller dispersion makes the material much stronger, and then it can support the osteoblast cells. And certainly the particles, wear debris particles which are released, they are also equally cytocompatible. We have investigated that. We have done preclinical studies in the rabbit animal, in the rabbit model for 12 weeks to 28 weeks, and most of the cases, I am just 1 second. Hello, আমি একটা অনলাইন লেকচার দিচ্ছি। So one of the things that what we can see is that biomedical implants. So this is that we have done biomechanical analysis, and this can be benchmarked against clinically used implants. Knee joint replacement. So this is one of the examples that we have taken from the clinical case study. You can see in the X-ray radiographs where these materials, when with this patient, when he has undergone the revision surgery, then they have reused that stimulant as these materials, risk factors, and they have used these materials and to cause this infection. And total knee joint replacement is one of the things that when people who are suffering from knee pain and osteoarthritis, they need to undergo this total knee joint replacement, which is not an easy operation, which is quite difficult. And this total knee joint replacement, again, this particular material, this white colored material, this is again made of the ultra-molecular polyethylene liner. So once you develop that ultra-molecular polyethylene liner, it not only can be used in acetabular liner in total hip joint replacement, but also can be used in total knee joint replacement. This is one of the examples that we are collaborating, imprint-funded collaborative research with IIT Guwahati. You can see ultra-molecular polyethylene-based materials is been developed, and then it has been used. Particularly, it has been tested in the hip joint wear simulator. Now, this is some of the other research areas that Kanagra's group is currently pursuing, and which, in the lack of time, I am not able to explain you much more. Now, in the field of dentistry, edentulism, partial or total tooth loss is one of the major problems. So, in order to treat the edentulism, we have developed these dental implants in the Center for Excellence on Biomaterials. Now, these dental implants has a very specific design features. With that apical end, it is a much tapered, and it has a very significant design thread morphology and so on. And these implants are manufactured, and then after that it has been put it into the torque testing, and then after the torque testing we have done the sandblasting and acid etching, and then this has been also proven to be biocompatible in the preclinical studies in the rabbit condyle. And all the properties and microstructure has been tested, even the torsion has been tested in that against these Straumann implants. This is one of the clinical studies we have just completed at one of the hospitals in Bangalore, and then currently the same clinical study is being continued at another hospital in Wardha. This is a cranioplasty surgery to treat patients with decompressive craniectomy. And so essentially, when the patients have this part of the cranium has been removed to treat the patients because of the large intracranial pressures. So these patients, they lose this cranium symmetry. And once they lose this cranium symmetry, we have used this polymethyl methacrylate implant, the acrylic flap, and then place it there. And then once we place it, then after the post-operative CT scan, you can see that acrylic flap, they remain there, and then the patient can retain that cranial index of symmetry up to 95% or so on. So which is clinically acceptable. So this cranioplasty surgery was possible because of the novelty in utilizing engineering design software at Indian Institute of Science, where we have used the CT scan data from the patient's cranium. Then we have processed it using multiple algorithms to define the specific contours of the cranium defect, to specific contours and morphology of cranium defect. Then after that, this file has been transferred to 3D printer. Now 3D printing essentially allows us to fabricate this human cranium model. Again, on this human cranium model in the specific part, this PMMA is cast, and then they're being sent to patients. Hearing disability and eye-related disability, blindness is also another major healthcare-related issue. Just to give you some numbers, in the hearing disability, what is the prevalence? Is nearly 27 million people suffer from hearing disability in India. Now, cochlear implants, again, many elderly patients, you have seen that they call hearing machine, and then hearing machine is nothing but cochlear implant. Again, this is imported, and many of these cochlear implants I know because my father has received this cochlear implant. So these cochlear implants cost somewhere around 27 to 30,000 to go as above as 70,000 to 1 lakh. And many poor people in India, or many elderly people in the economically challenged cross-section of the society, they cannot afford this cochlear implant to get better sound or to retain that acceptable level of hearing ability. So CGCRI Calcutta, they have developed these orbital implants in hydroxyapatite based, which is also clinically tested, and also at the same time they have developed these calcium phosphate granules and all. The next one, urinary bladder associated pathologies. So urinary bladder carcinoma is one of the prevalent diseases in the elderly patients, and it is more prevalent in male compared to women. So one of the clinical treatment is that one is the autograft, but another clinical treatment is alloplasty, where the neobladder can be reconstructed, which is made of the synthetic bladder. Another things in the case of the urological diseases which require bladder augmentation. So in the bladder case of bladder augmentation, bladder graft can be placed to improve the capacity and compliance. The third one is a bladder conduit, that is the tubular graft to facilitate natural voiding. And fourth one, ureteral stent, just like coronary stent. Here, ureteral stent essentially allows the urine to pass through this bladder in case if you have gallbladder stone or many other stones which will restrict the urine flow to the bladder. Now, I'll skip some of the slides in the interest of the time, and then let me go through the international status. Like this is the major groups who are working in the field of biomaterials and implants, both in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And you can see this is extremely popular and very much societally relevant. And some of the big names in the United States is Bob Langer at MIT, Christian Seth at University of Colorado, United States, whereas in Europe, Sarana Best at Cambridge University, Aldo Boccaccini at Erlangen, Germany, and down to different other countries in Italy and Spain and Asia Pacific region. Some of the global research institutions, again, these are like outside India in biomaterials and bioengineering. This certainly does not include the global research institutions in India, and they are actually spreading all over the world, from Australia, Australian Research Council sponsored training center for innovative bioengineering, to Belgium Prometheus group. So this group is established within a hospital. This is a unique group that, that I have not seen many such groups, many such translational research centers, which are essentially located inside the hospital. So you can see the patients at the same time you can conduct some meaningful translational research. Asia Pacific technology market, if you see the next entry point, what is the bottleneck? As I said, that healthcare expenditure as percentage of GDP in Asia Pacific region is 5%, well below the OECD target of 12%. And as of 2018, only 30% of the APAC countries had a developed regulatory framework in place. That is also on the present situation. So in the Asia Pacific, it is a 51% of the global population and 32% of the world GDP in the Asia Pacific. Okay, so one of the center which requires some attention is the Curran Center at Galway, Ireland. So this is again one of the world's largest center. Abhay Pandit is currently leading this center. It has 61 academic leads, around 500 researchers, 8 clinicians, and 6 universities. Galway is an important city in Ireland because most of the biomedical device manufacturing companies, many of the top players, are located in Galway, and that make this kind of Curran Center quite an important center of relevance in our field. So here clinicians are KOL, key opinion leaders, and have led medical device trials, and there are 28 industry partners, 10 multi-institution, multinational corporations, and 18 small to medium enterprises, and so on, and 406 academic collaborations globally. This is the Harvard University Wyss Institute. So they essentially go all the way up to technology transfer, but they certainly do not have the commercialization in their scope of the activity, but they essentially support entrepreneurs and residents. This is one of the new things that Harvard University has started in recent times. This is one of the center from Italy. So this is called IISc, which is essentially equivalent to our CSIR, CGCRI. So Italy, they have a Italian National Research Council, INR, and that supported it is that IISc that is in Italy. This is the Henry Royce Institute at the University of Manchester. Again, biomedical technology or 3D tissues and additive manufacturing is certainly one of the key research areas at the University of Manchester. Okay, now coming to some of the last few slides. So last few slides in terms of the recommendations. If you see that I have suggested 6 recommendations. One is that implement national regulatory framework to streamline accelerated regulatory approval process, strengthen basic research, and I'll go one by one. This is the strengthen basic research. You can see artificial intelligence and machine learning is one of the next big thing in the field of engineering and technology, and this has to penetrate to accelerate the biomaterials development. Now, structure property correlation biomaterials using high resolution multi-scale measurements, and then you have the 3D bioprinting in microgravity for human spaceflight program that Indian Space Research Organization is actively considering, co-culture and lab-on-chip approach for cytocompatibility evaluation, 3D bioprinting of cartilage, and so on. Preclinical and clinical translational research that should take place in 5 years' time, and quantitative exploration and creation of biomaterial informatics. One of the example of this 3D bioprinting, as I said, this is currently going. This is one of the ongoing research programs in our group. This is the anatomy of the central nervous system. You can see CNS, central nervous system, PNS, peripheral nervous system. If some nerves in the peripheral nervous system is injured, this is the autograft and allograft approach is the same patient from the leg. Let's say some part of the nerve is cut and then placed it here with the suture so that axonal regeneration can take place. This can be from same patient in case of the autograft. It can be from different patients, different human patients. Then it will be allograft. But alternative clinical treatment approach can be utilized, but which is certainly not the case in India so far, but in somewhere in the world they have tried is the 3D bioprinting to make this biofabricated nerve conduit and then place it here. So that is a alternating way. Now, clinical context-driven translational research towards the human diseases, as you can see, that it needs the GLP compliant, it accelerated biocompatibility testing, good manufacturing practice protocol related manufacturing facility, 3D bioprinting, vasculation angiogenesis of tissue engineered scaffolds, and so on. So one of the classic examples is our Translational Center for Orthopedic Dental Applications, where you can see many of the institutes from IIT Kanpur down to Sri Chitra Institute of Medical Science and Technology, they are part of this center. Third one is that nowadays industry collaborations capabilities grow and sustain incubators and startups. These are some of the very important things because we need to have some strategic policy center for market research and the National Registry of Medtech Innovations and so on. And we should also implement Industry 4.0, that is a new thing in industry, so that Internet of Things in place and then everything is computerized. And we should strengthen innovation ecosystems in startups, MSMEs, as well as the industry. As you see the global economic and manufacturing trends in India, so some of the newer governmental policies, particularly Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, is currently viewed as a collective resolve of Indians to make India self-reliant in strategic sectors and self-sufficient in critical technologies, which certainly includes implants for the human health care. And if you look at the India's economic and manufacturing trajectory, certainly, India's current manufacturing thing is the 2.5 to 2.9 trillion GDP, which is, quite an important number. So it shows some growth in last few years. Now, if you look at the geographical locations of the major medical device industries in India, so it is scattered all over the country. In the northern part, it is Delhi and Uttar Pradesh. In the southern part, it is Tamil Nadu, Bangalore, and in the western part, it is largely in this Gujarat area. So there is not much in the eastern part, as you can see correctly. So some of the fundings that one can also receive from IKP Trust, that is Innovation, Knowledge and Progress part, and there are some IKP Ventures. These are some numbers which are meaningful in this particular slide. Now, revamp medical education, innovation, medical system, and medical institutes. So there should be certainly policy level recommendations like bioengineers clinics in residence, and so on. So this is one of the examples where we have collaborated very extensively with neurosurgeons, and this has led to the success of the clinical study in the cranioplexy surgery by neurosurgeons. Last one is that introduce and implement national policies and action plans. There should be national mission on bioimplants. There should be innovation and road mapping workshops and so on. So innovation, translation, regulation, and commercialization should be 4 pillars. And here, what I have recommended in my recent book is that Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare should essentially shake hands with other ministries like Science and Technology, Heavy Industry, Public Enterprises, Commerce and Industry, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise, and Skill Development Entrepreneurship, so that India should implement the next mission as the Healthy India, where they will essentially regulate, enter biomaterials, commercialization, and translation research in India. Finally, this should be coming under the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission that the Prime Minister has recently announced. And these are the references and further reading. I'm talking about these biomaterial science and implants, which are in line with many of these recent programs by the Government of India. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the various sponsors which have supported our research over the last 15 years or so, and also the team, where we have many of the students who have graduated from my group. They essentially come from various disciplines like physics, chemistry, mechanical engineering, material science, and so on. And this photo is a little bit older, and you can see that our work essentially covers biomaterials and implants, regenerative engineering, bioelectric medicine, biomicrofluidics, as well as engineering ceramics. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Hello.
Yes, Bikram sir, namaste.
Namaste.
Sir, actually, I'm a participant, Doctor.
Yeah.
Sir, can I take some suggestion from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it is a nice presentation, sir, and so many applications you had given in a very deep manner, and what is the importance of that one also you described. Sir, as in mechanical discipline, what kind of help we or what type of research we can able to take in the biofield? One I know that is for the teeth or bone that for the manufacturing of that one, some with some type of materials they are maybe ceramics or something they are mixing it and they are doing it. But how we can able to take this field for our research? Can you suggest something, sir?
Biomechanics is one of the important thing. Okay. So biomechanics. So you apply the mechanics in. So you apply the mechanics to the biological system.
Sir.
Second thing is that this additive manufacturing is the next thing. So I think you should collaborate with the materials people and then take this particular field of research. So without collaboration you cannot do, and also involve the clinicians. So these are some of the ideas.
Sir, the teeth they are manufacturing with some model with some materials, etc. Or sometimes some I have seen some